Hello everyone, welcome back to GGN. This is part 3 for this news report today. I'll probably do 4 parts before this week ends. The first article I have is about Mali. Mali is France's operation anti-terrorism or pro-business. I guess that's what they're asking. Operation Serval. I've never even heard that's what it's called. But since the beginning of Operation Serval in Mali, French President Hagel has maintained that his country's military intervention has no other goal than to fight against terrorism. France is not pursuing any particular interest other than the safety of a country that is a friend. That's what you call someone or a country or a nation of people after you basically set up a colony and you dominate and occupy them and make them speak your language. Basically, they capitulate. They're your friends, right? It's like how we said when we're going into Iraq, right? France boosted al-Qaeda in Mali by paying 11 million pounds in ransom, says U.S. ambassador. France helped al-Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb to grow strong by paying ransoms of nearly $11 million for 4 hostages in Mali. She served as ambassador to the country from 2002 to 2005. Then she said that she accused Paris of building up the very threat its soldiers are now fighting against. Well, that's pretty obvious. She probably has to be aware of that's what they're doing. That's the big game. You create the threat, controlled opposition. Is Qatar sponsoring al-Qaeda in Mali? There have been many reports circulating that Qatar is directly or indirectly supporting terrorist groups. So let me get this down here. In Mali, having asserted its influence in the rest of North Africa, but there would be no logical reason for Qatar to be involved or gain in meddling in Mali's affairs. Well, we know they're in Syria's because they want to get a pipeline, a natural gas pipeline, to compete with. I've never heard of this before. I've never seen any articles about Qatar being related to Mali, but we'll see, right? You go in there, links will be posted. 500 EU troops due in Malian capital to back up French war. So according to reports, the European Union training mission for Mali will arrive in Bamako later on Friday. Military sessions will be held northeast of the city. So 500 European Union troops are due in the Malian capital to back up France in its war in the Western African country. So the EU foreign ministers said here that they're launching a $16 million military operation to train and restructure the West African country's army. That's right. We talked about that before, about how they wanted the EU and NATO and that they wanted to get something going here with rebuilding the forces. They weren't going to pay for it. And then we saw the other article where the U.S. said they were willing to pay for it. So the U.S. is paying for the European Union's army in Mali. 30-year CIA vet talks false flag at Brookings Institute. So this Bruce Riedel is a 30-year CIA veteran and current Brookings Senior Fellow. In his article, Algeria, Complex Ally in the War Against al-Qaeda, he gives a description of the Algerian Counterterrorism Unit, DRS, and its methods. It's known for its tactic of infiltrating terrorist groups, creating false flag terrorists, and try to control them. He writes, rumors have associated the DRS in the past with the Malian warlord, Ghali, head of Ansar al-Din's al-Qaeda in the Maghreb ally in Mali, and even with this Bel Mokhtar, the al-Qaeda terrorist who engineered the attack on natural gas plant, was again tied to Afghanistan and tied in trade by the CIA. Here the CIA vet admits that the Algerian intelligence agency is in the business of creating false flag terrorists and that the agency is rumored to have ties to terrorist attacks in northern Africa. Said the statement is quite interesting as the concept of false flag is usually labeled as some outrageous conspiracy theory. Said we also are aware of the fact that the Brookings institution is one of the think tanks that warmed the idea of using false flag attacks to attain public support, i.e. humanitarian, for an invasion of Iran, of course, and regime change in Syria, which they're doing. That's why the U.S. in that video in Tarpley was talking about that they just, hell no, we don't want any compromise, from the rebels. We want full regime change because they're going according to a Brookings publication, step by step. In a 2009 paper, the authors openly contemplate a possible provocation to escalate things to the point of armed conflict. They're talking about which path to Persia, which we've covered this before about Iran. And they talk about all the different scenarios that might play out. But it said, however, since it would be up to Iran to make the provocation move, the U.S. would never know for sure when it would get the requisite Iranian provocation. In fact, it might never come at all. Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys remember this video that was going around. Patrick Clausen, the think tank's director of research, if Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. So yeah, Israeli lobbyists, we need a false flag to start the war. Pretty sick. But this before and after image of Afghanistan is hard to bear. This image of Afghanistan might be hard to wrap your head around, it says, but it's totally accurate. Prior to 3+ decades of war, Afghanistan, and it says here, in Kabul in particular, had a pretty solid setup, one that Westerners would often visit. Sound familiar, right? Like, could be Libya, could be Syria, probably even Iraq. Sadly, the image on the right is likely to remain a reality for the foreseeable future. Taken by the amateur photography in 1960s, 2 women are his daughters. It says Afghan women, even the most, don't bear arms or legs in public. This and other pictures show Westerners and Afghans in Western-style clothing, clean streets, buildings without any bullet holes. So there you go. There's a picture. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? There's no trees, just no little water fountain, and no people. Hagel to withdraw. Thomas Ricks, who is well-sourced in Democratic national security policy circles, says there's a 50-50 chance Chuck Hagel withdraws from consideration from the Secretary of State job. He said he didn't do too well in his Senate hearing last week and didn't seem interested in the job. See, that's the thing. People that aren't interested in the job, it's like a lot of times those might be the best people. Now, I'm not saying that Hagel ain't a shill. It's like everybody else. Otherwise, he wouldn't at least be considered by Obama. They say he has the votes, but not much else. Well, the thing is he says his big problem is that no one much wants him running the Pentagon. When he's talking about no one, he's talking about a minority, actually, not a majority. He's talking about Zionist Israel. That's who the no one is. It's not actually Americans. It's Americans posing as Americans that are actually loyal to Israel first. That's actually their slogan, Israel first. And they've put up, the Israeli lobbies and Zionists have put up a lot of money, millions of dollars to lobby. That's why this guy is, like I said yesterday, it's almost as like he's being interrogated in Guantanamo Bay or something for this job. And the guy was an actual veteran. He'd be the first veteran ever. So, but no, they want douchebags like John Kerry and George Bush who dodge the draft and who just really aren't really warriors in that. So, trust fund babies and what is it, blue bloods. Carl Levin, the Senate Arms Service Committee chairman, said that the demands for information Republicans are making for former Senator Chuck Hagel were unprecedented, saying that Hagel would proceed as soon as possible and that the request for financial information from groups Hagel is affiliated with would not slow the process. The requests are things no prior candidate has ever been asked for, way beyond what the rules of the committee are. He has provided all the financial information that was required. So this is part of the leaner army that we've been talking about with drones and special forces. The Pentagon eyes quick strike forces across the planet. Panetta downplays lack of troops in Benghazi, but moves for global capabilities. So speaking to Congress, Panetta downplayed the military's lack of troops in Benghazi during the September consulate attack, insisting the military is not a global 9/11 service. I love that quote. That can't be anywhere within minutes across the planet. You know, my thing is like most intelligence agencies are probably interconnected. Is everybody in on it? Does everybody know? Like, you know, I hear people say, well, how could everybody be in on it? Well, they're not. You got people that are in skull and bones like John Kerry. I mean, if you haven't seen that movie, The Good Shepherd or whatever, with Matt Damon about the CIA in the early days, it'll tell you everything about it. The people that are in strategic positions have a death oath, an oath, right, to the death. So it doesn't have anything to do with freaking Constitution or loyalty to the American people. So it's not just the intelligence, it's special forces, interconnected. I don't think there's any real sovereign nations left. I mean, Iceland seems kind of weird. There's some resistance down in South America, but for the most part, the planet has been dominated. They've been dominated. Nations of people, indigenous, just whatever, regular people have been dominated and have capitulated to this global elite, to this global power. Finally, they've dominated everything. There's nothing else to really dominate. Just take the resources. And before you go in there and just start taking resources and killing people, getting away, you got to go in there and kill some people prior and hire some terrorists and stuff like that and say, well, see, it's a humanitarian crisis. We better go in there and save them. So they need these special forces for this type thing, for extraction of resources, quick strikes and stuff like that, because they know wherever they're going to go, this global. See, we've already been the global 9/11 service for so long, not really in a sense of being good, but actually just for the global corporations and an interest, international interest of dominating and exploiting countries and people. People are pissed off, like drone strikes in Pakistan. This global 9/11 service has just pissed the world off at America, and we don't really have much say in it at all. So now when they go in there, they're going to have these quick strike special forces because they can't occupy places. Well, they can, but they don't want to do that anymore. It's all about the illusion of soft power, of helping humanitarian aid. Jets roar over Pacific skies as U.S. military gathers allies and drills to keep ahead of China. So, fighter jets from the U.S. and two key allies roared in the Western Pacific skies in the combat phase of annual exercises that have gained importance as the region responds to the rise of China and other potential threats. So, China's economy booming is a threat. So, see, that's how you know something is just effed up, when other people can't prosper and you can't just leave them alone, right? It's all about interest. And the only reason is because there's an East Bloc and there's a West Bloc, right? And trading. And it's all run by the same damn people who set up both systems to compete with each other. And neither of them are free. New Russian citizens to get call up for military service. Russian government has approved a bill that allows male immigrants under 27 to be called up for military service once they receive citizenship, even if they have already served in their country of origin. So sucks for them. Chinese military leaders calling for enhancing combat preparedness. So it goes on here, says the Chinese leader called for expanding and deepening the military combat preparedness in his tour. And I keep saying this, I think it's more of just threats and talk and stuff like that. Like I said, I think most of the hot wars are gone. I don't really fear nuclear age or anything like that. It says here, the only thing I fear is like I said 3 years ago when I started GGN, is we are the terrorists, and that's how people have to see it. And when they come to completely dominate and strip whatever they can get from us, people start to actually fight back because they have no other choice when they're backed in a quarter. Is to at least defend themselves. That's what the strike teams are for. That's what the war on terror is for. It's all for us. I mean, you might see Israeli Mossad or MI6 or whatever, or some kind of Chinese special forces or something working along with like EU and NATO troops inside America, shooting Americans. China's one-child policy creates wimpy military recruits. This is what we talked about. While China's military prowess has long been a source of concern for other nations, there are signs that it's not well within the armed forces. So it goes on here and it says that it's kind of a crappy example of these troops that basically had racked up gambling debts. They stole some weapons, went out to try to rob a bank to become solvent again. But they should have just used one of the quotes from one of the generals that I saw a couple of years ago, which is basically they're a bunch of spoiled, pampered brats, and they can't even go through physical training. The incident revealed some serious problems, including a low sense of morale among military personnel and the lax oversight structure. These pampered children born after 1979 began quitting the military for all sorts of frivolous reasons. I don't want to get a tan, and I hate military quarters with no air conditioning, were among excuses cited. Good news, I guess, if they are going to come over here and try to shoot Americans along with Marines and NATO and stuff. Restricted U.S. Army training reconnaissance, troop, and below urban operations. So pretty creepy stuff. And this little guy was distributed, authorized to the U.S. government agencies and contractors. And it's talking about urban-specific tasks for stability operations and civil support operations. We're talking about civil unrest and stuff. And pretty creepy stuff. Female search area. There's no male search area. I guess they just pop them in the head or something like that. Kill all the males. Holding areas, checkpoints to tell you how they set it up. Roadblocks, how they're going to take over a town. Because most towns are the same, right? They got a little town square and stuff like that. So remember about the 82-year-old nun that broke into the nuclear plant to show how lax the security was? They try to improve it by what? Hiring a former Target store manager to oversee the nation's nuclear security. The office charged with shutting Guantanamo Bay closes. The U.S. shut down the office of its special envoy in charge of the closure of Guantanamo Bay. I guess I'll just stop here. When we come back, we'll continue with these drones, and I'll finish up with other news that I have kind of stacked up for the week. This is GGN on Darko. Thank you.